Hello and welcome. Today I have the privilege to talk to a good member of my community. In fact, one of my favorites, Kristen Neighbarger. She is an author and an author coach. And I'm so excited to talk to you about writing today. Thank you for being here.
I am so excited to be here.
Listen, I had really the privilege to know you from a client perspective. And I am so excited to have the chance to have people know about your skills. So the first question I have for you is what led you to become a coach? Because you're really natural.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I appreciate that so much. And I guess that's kind of always the goal as a coach is to be relational and to be relatable and to attempt to listen more than I talk, which doesn't always work, but I do try that. And what led me to coaching is honestly, it was kind of a natural progression from being a published author into being an author coach, which might sound a little bit strange, but when I first started writing, even well before I signed my publishing contract, honestly, well before I even had the framework for my first book, I started doing a ton of research because the reality is that writing these days, writing in this day and age, being an author is so much more than just putting your words on paper. What I did not realize when I first started writing was that I was going to have to be a content creator as well, and that to build an audience takes, deliberate and consistent time and effort. And so when I finally embraced the calling that God had put on me to be an author, I embraced it fully and started doing all the research. And what I realized very quickly is that it's not all in one place. There's not just some place that I can go and find out everything that I need to know about
Mhm.
surviving and thriving in this fast-paced world of being an author. And so through my journey to become a published author, I learned the ins and outs of it. I learned all the things that nobody tells you. And so by the time I actually published my book, I just really felt pulled and convicted to stand in the gap for other authors because I wanted there to be a place where you could sit down and be like, okay, what do I do? How do I do this? What do you mean I have to have social media? Like, what do
Yeah.
I even, I mean, what do I even post on social media? What do you mean I should write to a specific audience? How do I figure out who my audience is? What are their pain points? And so all of that information that can feel so overwhelming, I felt called to create a system and create a coaching practice to help people move from the beginning stages of being an author to not just publishing their book, but then promoting and marketing and all of the things
Yeah.
that come after that. And golly, once I started, I honestly just couldn't stop. And so now I try to balance. So I try to be about half-time author and half-time author coach. But more often than not, I'm about 75 to 90% coach and 10% writer these days. And so that's how I landed here.
Wow. Well, I admire the tenacity of taking the time to research, because from a creative perspective, we just want to create. We want to write, and express ourselves and share our message. But what comes after that is how do we spread that message? Is marketing, is promotion, is all what you listed that doesn't come to mind easily, from a writer perspective. So I'm very grateful that you chose to to help others, during the process because it can be very overwhelming. Is there anything during the process that you realized, oh, I wish I'd known this before, some valuable lesson that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest struggle for me, and honestly, it's one of the biggest struggles my authors deal with as well, is knowing who they're writing for. I think from my own experience in working with clients that a lot of times when we sit down to write first, like in the early stages, we don't even think about the reader, which seems counterintuitive to me now, years down the road. But when I
Mm-hmm.
first started writing, I wrote topics. Right. I wrote topics. I wrote about things that interested me. I wrote about things I was passionate about or messages that I felt like God wanted me to share. But it never occurred to me to actually process who's going to read this? Like, who am I actually writing to? And so when I came across some training on finding your reader, it was like an aha moment for me because I realized I'm not writing to the masses. Like that's the misconception we have. I
Mm-hmm.
think is that we think we're a best this is terrible, but we kind of think we're like going to be a best-selling author without ever putting in the work of figuring out who my reader even is. And so the reality is those like well-known authors have created readership over the years, but when we start out, we don't have that luxury. And so if we don't know who we're writing for, how can we know how to serve them? I think I just wrote about this on my blog this week, actually. Writing with a reader in mind, I actually, on a post-it note on my desk where I could see it every single day, wrote, I write for, and then I listed who my audience member was.
Wow.
And I had another post-it note was what that said, and these are their pain points. And so here's who I'm writing for, and here are the things they're struggling with. So every day when I sat down at my computer, I would be able to see this is the person I'm writing to, and this is the struggle that they're having. And so as I was writing, then I can make sure I was gearing everything that I was writing to that person and their struggles. And that changed everything for me, absolutely everything in my writing life.
That's so beautifully put because it is a conversation. We're not just writing words on the paper. We are communicating. And so in any conversation, who are we talking to? Who are we talking with? What is something that we want to share that can be helpful? It's one of the reasons why this podcast was ever created.
Yeah,
We try to
yeah,
be helpful to others as we journey through life together. So writing, it's a gift in that sense. We have the ability to communicate something, but have
absolutely.
clear in mind who you're talking with. Who are you helping? It's key. And you're right. I am struggling with that in this phase I am in right now, figuring out, some of my content, some of my books. I'm like, okay, who's going to read this? Well, I want the whole, well, they can't be the whole family. It might be just a children's story, or it might be,
Yeah,
like you said, what is the problem that they have and how can what I write be helpful toward a solution?
yes.
And so that really narrows it down and helps us to be more effective in the communication. So I do, as a person who struggles with that, want to ask if you have any special recommendation how to even begin, because that heart is so big that we want to just share it with the whole world.
Yeah.
How do we narrow down?
I think that the fear of narrowing down is that we are limiting ourselves. That was my struggle when I first started. Well, if I say I'm only writing to these specific people, what about everybody else? So understanding that your audience might be an audience for a season and not an audience for an eternity. And I can say that from an author perspective because the audience that I wrote my first book for is not the specific audience who I write for now. And so I served them and served them well for a season. And while they still are part of the audience that I'm serving now, my audience has shifted a bit as well as my messaging has shifted. And so understanding that if God is putting you in a place to write to a specific audience right now, he's not going to pigeonhole you into only writing for that audience for the rest of eternity. And so just being open, I think, to evolution in our writing lives and in our audiences sometimes gives us the peace that we need to serve the specific people that God is calling us to serve at this point in time. And so honing in on that, really listening, really connecting what's in your heart and your soul to the writing that you're doing for that specific audience and knowing that this isn't a life sentence sometimes makes it easier.
I love that. Being a service to God. Where does he need us now?
Yes.
What is the message we have to give now and who needs to hear it? It doesn't mean that's our only message throughout our life.
No.
I like the word evolution. We are called to evolve to our fullest
Yes.
potential. That requires steps, seasons, chapters. Speaking of
Yep.
books, like if we look at life as a book, different chapters, different message, different audience for us writers.
Yes.
So that's very valuable consideration that, like you said, it doesn't limit us at all. On the contrary, it amplifies our potential. The next thought comes to mind, though, in our sharing our message, you mentioned content creation. So we are writing books, blogs. The blogs are posted. So what kind of a role does social media play into our spreading our message?
Yeah, way too of important of a role, I would I would say honestly. Like I mentioned earlier, I think when we embrace our calling as writers, we just want to write. Um, but people have to be able to find our words. And so there the odds of them just stumbling across our website or the odds of them of randomly finding our book on Amazon, it's not high at all. Like that's just not realistic. And so what I always tell myself and my clients is that we have to serve our people and serve them well. And in order to serve our people and serve them well, we have to know where they are and provide value to their life in that area. And so if you think about where are people right now, the reality is that they're on social media. And so that's where Instagram and Facebook play a huge role in advancing our message and in serving our people. So honestly, the algorithm is ever changing, the landscape is ever changing. But the one thing that I know is true is that in order to serve people, we have to build relationships with them. And so that means more than I'm just going to post something on social media every day and then shut down and then not ever engage with it. And so while content creation, like actually posting on social media is important, honestly, what the algorithm, not to bow to the algorithm, but the reality is we do have to kind of pay attention. But what the algorithm prioritizes is relationship, which sounds weird because how can an algorithm prioritize relationship? Well, let me tell you how. It recognizes comments, saves, and sends. And it recognizes the more comments, the more conversation that is happening from you as a creator, but also on your content. That triggers the algorithm that this is useful content. I'm going to show it to more people. And so instead of thinking about social media as content creation, if we start thinking of it as a relationship builder, it shifts the focus. So
Mm-hmm.
no longer am I just throwing stuff into the void and hoping somebody sees it. If I shift from that mindset to I'm going to use this as a platform to build relationships, to actually have an meaningful conversation, meaningful comments, send this post to people who need it, then that's going to get our message to more people. And so that's the role of that was like social media in 2 minutes or less. But that's why social media has to be a priority to us as authors and as ministers, because our ministry is not going to thrive if we aren't building relationships with the people who need us to minister to them. That's Facebook and Instagram, but also Substack is blowing up. Substack is where the readers are. If you're an author who's not on Substack, you are missing a population of people who are desperate to be served. So while social media are snippets, right? Social media is like bite-sized. They're the appetizer. Substack is the full meal. And so you post on Instagram, you post on Facebook, that little appetizer, the nibble, and then you send them to Substack so that they can really be fed.
Oh, wow. I love that so much. I never thought about it as a relationship. I was just blind because the truth is I have now considering the consequences of my starting to post more. I have had a Facebook page since, I don't know, decades ago, but I never used it. Only recently, becoming an author, I realized, yeah, it's important. But I reconnected with people I had lost
Yeah,
touch with. I
yeah,
am building, really fostering this fellowship. I met you through that,
yeah,
and it's a wonderful way to be aware we're not alone in the world,
yeah,
especially with everything happening right now in the world. It's so important to share
yeah.
really God's love and light and kindness through our messages, through the way we communicate with others. So a light bulb went on, just give me a moment realization of using social media and Substack. As a writer, I haven't used it yet. I have my account, I go read, but so I learned something too. I'm sure the audience did as well. Speaking of that, where could people find more information about you or get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I am Substack and
Yes.
obviously Facebook and Instagram, and I have a website, and you can find me. It's just my first name and last name.com. And then my all my handles are Kristen Neibarger, same thing, Kristen Neibarger, super easy to find. You can find me on Substack there as well. I write two different Substacks. I try to write them weekly. So I have a Substack called Ink and Intention, and it is for authors. And I also have a Substack called A Seat at the Table that is for the weary and the wounded in the
Oh,
spiritual space.
so needed.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kristen. I will make sure to post these links on our description of the episode so people can access it easily. I'm so grateful to you for taking the time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And remember, everybody, please take care of yourself, mind, body, and spirit. Take the time to breathe, smile, and do something to soothe yourself today.